I know there are bigger issues at play here. So, talking about, I just read some comments, and talk about market is one thing, but there's bigger issues at play here. There's going to be a lot more other things we need to worry about than the markets, and I totally agree. Another thing is people talking about and saying, oh, well, what do you think is going to happen to property market? Not that you should be asking me, but I do have my prediction. But are you kidding me? Even if we just focus away from what they're doing to us, and especially Victorians at this stage, what do you think is going to happen to the markets? The only thing that can happen, you could have a little spike where people have this knee-jerk reaction thinking that they can get safety inside of their own property, but then they won't be able to because they haven't got the job. So as much as you'd like to and you think is a good time to buy and lock something in and be in your property because that way you somehow feel safe, and I can see why people do, you'll go to the bank and bank is bleeding and suffering with their net interest margin being cut and their share price going down. They're not going to give you a loan, a mortgage. As much as they'd like to put you in debt, they're not going to, because you're too much of a risk. Because even if you're lucky enough to have a job at the moment, you are a very high risk, just like everyone else, potentially to lose that job, just like everyone else, including myself. So no one is really in a safe and a good financial situation at the moment. Some have already hit the rocks, and everyone else is just teetering on the edge of abyss, I think, because it's not going to end well. I mean, with one of the biggest, most important elections coming up at the end of the year in the United States, with Trump and the hate between the left and right, there's going to be, I mean, there are riots already, but what you don't want to see over there is a civil war. And if you think that's not going to affect us here in Australia, just like we managed to dodge the GFC, think again.
The impact of the coronavirus crisis is feeding through to the great Australian dream, with fewer homes hitting the market. The number of homes listed for sale last month fell 1% nationally, with asking prices also down nearly 1% in June. The biggest falls were seen in Hobart, with Canberra and Darwin also posting fewer for sale signs. Sydney listings were down more than the national average. But the number of properties hitting the market rose in Melbourne and Perth. Since this time last year, national listings are down 7.5%.
I know I brought you this, and it probably tells you that I take enough weight on this quick report, but I actually don't. What's happening at the moment is jitters. It's the volatility of the national listings up and this is down, and it's very hard to gauge it. Especially that the loans and the mortgages have been deferred. As for many mortgages, meaning that this is not a true picture of what people can afford to continue to be paying off. And then there was a report just before I watched that the 400,000 Australians have pulled their superannuation, which is their pension type thing, the saving, the nest egg for the future. They've pulled it from their superannuation into cash, so they have the money or the currency, which means that they're probably using that to be paying their bills and food, and maybe some even throwing it into their mortgage to not default, to be kind of ahead. So you can't say that while the government is allowing people to pull their superannuation out uh, before they're 55 or 65, whatever the rule is, and also you don't have to be paying off your loan until you have to be paying off your loan. Obviously, the property is going to hold up artificially. They're just like once again kicking the can down the road until September, and then they might extend it, but how long do you extend it for? How long can banks live without their dividend? And how much blood can you squeeze out of the stone is the at the end of the day is the biggest question. So um, it is a waiting game, and it's like you can consider it the market's closed which is why there's not that many sales and there's not that many defaults, because it's just being deferred further in the future. And when it happens, when the market really reopens, when the reality hits home, when we go back to normal in a sense where you have to be paying a mortgage, you maybe can't take your superannuation out anymore. It's now whether you have a job or not, and because unfortunately a lot of people don't, um, that's when, so when the market reopens kind of fully with the housing, it'll just go down. It'll just drop like a stone. You watch, it'll happen before the end of this year. It'll have to, unless they prolong it. As long as they prolong it, as soon as they say this is it, we're not doing any more stimulus, you can't pull the money out of superannuation. The banks need to see their interest rate being paid as well, or the principal. You're going back onto the normal way of what you owed bank and what you have to, you know, what you owe bank every week, every month. This is it. Like the game's up totally. I mean, there's no way it's going to end up any other way. And before someone says, "Oh, well, it didn't end up that way," yeah, that's because they pulled another rabbit out of the hat, and people are not back to normal. They've done some other stimulus or done something else, or like I talked in one of my other videos, they've uh, instigated inflation, so they've kind of inflated the property prices out. But the problem is that inflation in prices is not going to be followed by people's inflation in their wages. So if everything doubles in price, okay, that's fine, as long as your wage doubles in price, which it never follows. And if it does, guess what? You're going to get taxed. If you're on, for argument's sake, $100,000 now, and you're paying like 35-40% all up income tax. When it goes up to 200,000, which is the same purchasing power, you'll be paying like 50% tax. So the inflation is not your friend. Inflation is nobody's friend, and then they're not going to let you off the hook by some inflation that they create. They're going to do for themselves, if that is one of the scenarios that happens. Which, by the way, I don't think it will be. I think it'll just go back to normal where people have to be paying off their uh, mortgages, where you can't pull your superannuation anymore, or you've already done it and used up all that money for food and rent and that sort of stuff, and then the real situation is exposed.